Hi, good evening, everyone. No? Good evening, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists of Louisiana. My name is Diane Schnell, and I'm honored to serve as the president of our Louisiana professional chapter. It's a privilege to see you tonight and to welcome you to our panel on immigration coverage. Thank you all for being here. Our mission at NAHJ is simple: to strengthen the integrity of stories told in Latino and immigrant communities across. Tonight we bring our journalists, legal experts, and community voices. That's our shared work. Telling these stories with care, with accuracy, and with responsibility. I want to thank our partners at Loyola and the National Association of Student Chapter for creating this space. We are fortunate to have our student chapter president here, Mabel Regalo Hernandez, but I'm gonna give her the floor so that she can introduce herself. Mabel.
Hi. Good evening and welcome to Loyola University. My name is Mabel Regalado Hernandez. I am a junior right now, and I'm currently studying broadcasting journalism here at Loyola, and I've enjoyed every single second of it. I am also the founding president of NAHJ Student Chapter, not only here in Loyola, but as well in all of Louisiana. Tonight is a special night, and I hope every one of you can take advantage of this opportunity in which we learn and hear from experts in this field. This panel is composed of great and amazing professionals that will discuss and answer questions that matter and affect us as Hispanics. We have two amazing journalist moderators, both Loyola alumni. I am beyond blessed and honored to present to you, of course, one of my moderators, a Latina journalist who is not only my greatest mentor, but someone who inspires me every single day. Please join me in welcoming, of course, Miss Lucy Bustamante from Fox 8. And Andres Fuentes, also from Fox 8. Of course, we have our lovely panelists here who are the professionals and the people that you'd like to talk to about any questions that you have in mind so that we can be as informed as we can. Because us as Hispanics or as a community, we need to stand with each other and we must build Latinos, whether it's in news, PR, advertising, anything communications. We must support each other. Thank you.
Well, I think we know how Mabel's going to do in her career. She's owning it already. Awesome. Amazing. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Mabel. Thank you to President Cole, who I know is not here right now, Dr. Haydel, who's always our partner and a yes, whatever we need. Also, Dr. Shanice Bickham, thank you so much for the warm welcome and congratulations in joining this incredible team at Loyola. Really looking forward to continuing our work with you. Also, Professor Dr. Michelle Rossi, who's also faculty advisor, Professor Lisa Collins, who I know is in the audience as well, there she is, and Albert DuPont, and our partners here at Loyola University. I am honored and really looking forward to co-moderating with my colleague Andres Fuentes from Fox 8, and he will continue with the introductions of our board members as well.
Right, and you know, I think this panel kind of came across us talking together. We don't normally work together, even though we work at Fox 8 together. It's usually you in the night, or me at night and you in the morning. But we got together and we were like, you know, a lot of the newsroom and really a lot of newsrooms across the country don't know how to cover this topic. And unfortunately, it's one that needs to be covered, and it needs to be covered in an accurate way. So I do want to say, you know, thank you to everyone that Lucy already shouted out. You'll probably get a lot more shout outs throughout the night. But really, the NAHJ Louisiana, Loyola and Mike Bringer, the vice president, Ramon Vargas, our treasurer, Brenda Murphy, our at-large member, and Juan Francisco Garcia, our social media coordinator, and of course, our president, Diane Schnell. You know, without you guys working behind the scenes, this wouldn't have been possible. And, you know, it's not just a policy issue when it comes to immigration. You know, there are people being affected day to day, and policies being changes up until we have right now. You know, National Guard look like they're gearing up to be here in New Orleans, and I know a lot of people are questioning, especially in the Hispanic community, what does that mean for their livelihood? So we got a great panel, excellent panel behind us, and we're gonna take it away. I guess Lucy's gonna start all those intros.
That's right. Okay, hold on. We're going to fix this situation here. Also, a quick note, if you would like to watch this later, if you want to share it with friends, NAHJ Louisiana members, the full presentation will be available tomorrow morning so that you can reference it and teach your classes with it and just give your students access to this STAR panel. So let's start off with introducing, first of all, Kathleen Gasparian. She is a nationally recognized immigration attorney based right here in New Orleans. She is the founder of Gasparian Spivey Immigration, where she works on a wide range of immigration issues. She is representing someone currently in a Netflix documentary, from employment-based visas to humanitarian protections. She has been a leading voice in both local and national conversations about how the laws impact families, workers, and communities.
And then next, you know, you can't talk about immigration and Loyola in the same sentence and can't mention Ms. Susan Weischer, immigration policy advocate, researcher with decades of experience, and she really has a perspective of how immigration law and policies have shaped not only Louisiana, but really worldwide. And, you know, she's a fantastic resource, and we're really blessed to have her.
And Bobby Jean Missick, you've probably seen her on our morning show with Verite News. She covers immigration and community issues. She has covered immigration in New Orleans for the last 5 years, last 2 years with Verite. Very strong focus on elevating underrepresented voices. And she brings a newsroom perspective on the challenges and opportunities of reporting immigration from the ground level. So we are really lucky to have her as well. And finally,
last but not least, Angela Ramirez. You might know her or her students, really, especially if you watch Leguizamo Does America. That episode actually featured a lot of what her work, Fuentes New Orleans does, developing and nurturing a lot of the Latino students that call New Orleans and Jefferson Parish and really the whole metro area home. What she's done with not only those students, but their families as well, making sure that they're taken care of, whether that's with school or applying to colleges, really. She has been fantastic with that. And so just to break down how this is all going to work, you know, we have our panelists, we're all going to ask them a few questions, and they all kind of have their expertise and their topics. Afterwards, we're going to open it up, get some questions from you guys, because at the end of the day, this really is an educational piece, not only how the immigration system is right now, but you as media members can kind of, you know, delve into that topic and how you can transfer some of the tactics to your own newsrooms and coverage.
Absolutely. All right, we will move to the chairs that Loyola so kindly set up here. Kathleen, we will start with you. Louisiana, to say the least, has been right at the center of many immigration developments. It has been before this conversation with DACA being heard right in our courtrooms. Talk about the local sheriffs signing 287G agreements with ICE, the other developments that we've seen, state laws requiring agencies to collect immigration status. Obviously, the latest story, Angola 57, as our governor calls it, ICE detention center at Angola, and then the large-scale raids like the one at Calcasieu Parish. There are quite a few partner agencies right now with ICE. Talk about that.
So first of all, thanks for having us here. This is an issue very clearly near and dear to my heart, and I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say, because I feel like I'm in the room with such great minds. So immigration, I think, how do we talk about immigration in Louisiana now? I think we step back and we talk about immigration law as a whole. And I think for those of us who kind of pay attention, maybe it feels like the whole world turned upside down over the past 6 to 8 months, 10 months. When was January? And the truth is, like, it feels like everything changed, but nothing really changed. And like, how is that possible? Well, law's complex, right? Law has a statute, agencies write regulations. We have not had a statutory change. We have not had regulatory change yet. We have had changes in enforcement and changes in policy. And I think, so one of the things we have to remember is the law that's in place right now was passed in 1996, right? Republican, yes, Bill Clinton was the president, but Republican Senate, Republican writers. And pretty much right after that law in 1996 was passed, everybody realized, oh heck, it does things we didn't really think about, and really realized like the system was broken. And that's from everything from mandatory detention, which is an issue we're struggling with now, all sorts of things. There has been no statutory change on the IRA since 1996, except for very brief, a thing called 245I. The last time immigration law for real was on the Senate floor was the morning of 9/11. And we all know what happened, right? And since that time, there has been nothing on the Senate floor about immigration, regardless of who supports legalizing DACA, who supports kids, who supports anything else. What we have had, right, also since 9/11, I'm gonna go through all of it. We got rid of the unions with the creation of DHS. We got rid of 3 of the biggest unions in the federal government, including, and so that has turned into this enforcement machine. The big, beautiful bill funded it. And so now we are in a place where there's tons of money, a very, very draconian law that everybody's realized is draconian since 1996. And then the Real ID Act passed after 9/11 stripped federal court review. And I can see everybody's eyes glazing over. What does that mean for me? What does that mean? It means that there is an administration who wants to take the broadest view, the most aggressive view on immigration enforcement. And since 1996, they've slowed, the tools have been clicking into place to give them the ability to do that. So issues we have, 287G programs. What does that mean? 287G is when DHS enforcement cooperates with local law enforcement. Well, usually that is through giving the local law enforcement money, but then also giving them very brief training about immigration laws. This is something that has been in the law for a long time. It has come in and out of fashion with usage. Usually the pushbacks in the communities have been so great when these programs have come into place that we've seen them fall. So ICE, a government agency in the executive branch, has given themselves great authority through writing regulations to stop people on the street and arrest and detain when they have suspicion of alienage, which is very different from the probable cause that your police officer needs to arrest you, right? But in creating these 287G programs, we create an issue, right, about who can stop and what powers is the police creating. And when the Supreme Court says that ICE can racially profile, what does that mean when the police are getting ICE powers? We have, for the first time, like, I don't know if you, like in law, we say this old adage, the people who are gonna fight the hardest over something are the ones with the least amount of power. I would say like the worst case I ever fought was an inheritance case over like $600. I'm not kidding. And so like people get really invested when they don't feel like they have power. And so historically, ICE really hasn't made friends with lots of other agencies, but that is changing. And we see here locally, there's a long history of ICE riding along with police officers. The 287G programs are the expansion of that. We've seen that not just in Jefferson Parish, but also in Lafayette, along the I-10 corridor. Those are problematic for our community. Or, I mean, maybe you don't see them as problematic. I see them as incredibly problematic, right? When our community is afraid of, it is hard for people to come forward and find protection in the community. large-scale ICE enforcement. So I think as a lawyer, what I call a raid and probably what the news call raids are different things, right? And that's okay. So, but I think what is interesting, like one of the things we've noticed as lawyers over the past 10 months, all of these stories are getting into the news. People being denied admission at the airport, people being picked up for this, people, you know, minor criminal issues being taken into detention, or been here a long time and ICE is finally doing enforcement. As somebody who's been in the immigration field for a really long time, I'm sitting there going, I can't believe this is getting in the news, because this is an issue I see once a month, right? Like, this is something that for immigration lawyers, it's like, yeah, this happens all the time. What is so different right now is the amount of coverage that it's getting, and that's a lot to do with social media, but it's also, I think, people are speaking out, and also the enforcement is more expansive. I would say, like, there is a speed trap near my house, and I get one of those camera tickets probably once every couple of months, but you know, that's because there's no discretion, right? The camera's gonna get me whether I'm going 2 miles over or 5 miles over. And that's where we're at right now, right? This is a cop who's gonna get you if you're going 1 mile over, whereas maybe in the past, nobody really felt that way. So the thing about immigration is, like I said, the statute hasn't changed. The courts have been stripped of their ability to review. And that keeps getting bigger and bigger. There was this like weird little Supreme Court case earlier this year that nobody thought was a big deal, but it basically said, like, the Eastern District can't do an injunction. Well, what does that mean? It means that in places like Louisiana, where representation is few and far between, where we don't have a lot of funds and we don't have a lot of pro bono, if ICE is making actions that are unlawful, it's like, I can't count on the big ACLU in California to file a lawsuit and get an injunction that's also going to protect my people. It means everybody's having to file lawsuits all over, right? We're having a split of where this review and the checks and the balances. That then translates into people not believing in the judiciary and lots of other things. Way beyond the scope of my time. So, if you haven't figured out, I'm a litigator, and man, can I talk. So let me go back to my note cards, Lucy. So what did I want to say? I wanted to say immigration is long, hard, and expensive. And anybody who tells you different hasn't had to do it lately. And by long, I mean long. So if you are a person born in India and you have a company sponsoring you for permanent residence, you will get your green card in 25 years, right? So there we go. I don't think that the national narrative is reflective of the true facts of immigration. And Sue is going to give you some true facts. But I just want to say the amount of migration to the US right now, yes, it is at an all-time high, but it is proportionate to what we saw in the last big waves of migration. So while the overall number is huge, when you look at proportions, it's not really. There are not a lot of pathways to migrate to the US. So all of this that you have to do it the right way, people are doing it the right way, okay? Like, this whole myth that they're not is one of my pet peeves. Like I said, we've had the same law since 1996, and nobody will even really get into big debate about it. So if we all agree that it's a problem, and we all agree that it's not what we want, why isn't the Senate letting arguments get to the floor? And that's when, as a lawyer, very cynically, I go, follow the money, right? So somebody is benefiting from having large numbers of people without work authorization. I will come back to this stuff. I have some data slides for you in your materials about where to get information from immigration. And I will talk about that when it is my time again. Because I'm out of time. That's in law, when you do arguments in front of a judge, they give you a light when you're out of time, and I think my little light just went on.
Thank you, Kathleen. Way to open. Way to just throw out everything.
Talk. That's
There we
it.
go.
That's all you have to do.
I do want to say the sheets and the information that Kathleen was referencing, that's on the flyers. If you haven't gotten them already, they're up there on the table. Feel free to grab one and share one, and we'll have them on our social media as well in the correct color, so that y'all can share and really inform the public with that. Now we're going to pivot to Susan Weischer. When we talk about the policy side, I know there's a lot of national laws. But what really, and I get it every day, the new laws that were passed by Louisiana legislatures this year, including Act 399 and Act 383, kind of expanded cooperation with immigration agents. And what really is scaring a lot of people is now that if you are benefiting from any sort of state resources, whether that's from the Department of Child and Family Services and other sort of agencies, now you have to kind of report your immigration status or keep that up to date. Kind of tell us what are the implications of these policies, and where can we kind of see these policies in action?
Well, I frankly didn't pay much attention to these laws this year, but Act 39, 399, that criminalizes interference with federal immigration operations. That's always been illegal, so you can't interfere with an arrest. You can witness it, you can tape it, but that's nothing new. Okay, and then requires immigration status for state services. Well, any state services that has to do with the federal means test benefit program, like Medicaid or Social Security or food stamps, you always had to have you always had to have legal status, and since the Welfare Reform Act of 1996, under the Clinton administration, you have to not only be a legal permanent resident, but you have to have been here at least 5 years. So I'm not sure how much of this was for show, but I'm not sure what state services it impacts, but it was a game changer in 1996 when they passed a law that said for the first time ever they were going to restrict welfare programs to legal permanent residents. That never happened before. And there was a big outroar, by the way, at that time, because they were not only going to do it for future immigrants, but present immigrants. In other words, elderly and disabled immigrants that were here legally and permanently and that were living off their SSI, as meager as it was, and their Medicaid, that was going to be taken away from them in 1996. And there was a huge organizing effort across the city and across the country to stop that, because at the time we told our congresspersons they can't naturalize because they can't they were told to learn English. They can't go home and they can't work, so what are we going to do? And we stopped it. But anyway, so I'm not really clear how much that
And I
affects
do believe we have your PowerPoints as well, if we can get that up on the screen for you.
Well, I guess it's like, do we want to look at, did you want to look at history of immigration to the United States, a crash course?
Yeah, let's do a little quick crash course, because I
Okay.
think, a lot of people are getting into this problem.
I'll just say stop. I'll say, next slide, okay? But the first slide, let's go to the first slide. Okay, first slide. I just think this will help put things in context, and I was asked to do a crash course in history of immigration in the United States and Louisiana. So first slide, please. Okay, and then we have this YouTube video. It's 4.5 minutes, and it's immigration to the United States. And if you want to open that up, and it's in 20-year segments, and you're going to see there's a ticker on the left. Can you open that? Yeah, okay, great. Here we go. Anyway, it starts in 7.
Susan, if you want to,
4 minutes, and we're going to cover all the.
if you want to grab your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so why don't we stop? Okay, if we'd stop right now. Okay, this is United States 1790 and before. We have 575,000 people that have migrated from Europe. Well, first of all, we had Native Americans, of course, populated the United States throughout the continent, and it's debated. Numbers vary, but it was millions and millions and millions of people. Okay, so the United States pre-1790, 575,000 people from Europe, 300,000 forced migrants from Africa. So that was our country in 1790. Let's go to, and you can see most for English, Irish, German descent, and mainly Protestant of faith. Let's go to the next 20 years. Okay, play. And they total up every 20 years over there. So the great number of people from Africa dropped significantly with the banning of the international slave trade. Hardly any Africans come in 1820 to 1840. We're up to about 500,000 again, another 500,000 Europeans. We start seeing people from China going to California for the gold rush, and Irish in the 1940s, 1840s rather, the famine. So people from Europe, it's ticking upwards there. And from 1860 to 1880, 41 million people, 4,100,000, forget that already passed. Okay, and this is the time period when we are beginning to see the Chinese are banned in 1882 and are banned for almost the next 60 years. This is where we're beginning to see many people from new places in Europe, including Southern Europe, many people coming from the revolution from Mexico that are escaping, and Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, people that we hadn't seen before. And we'll talk about the laws that happened. After World War II, after World War I and 1924, quotas begin. The first time we have a border patrol, the first time we have visas, the first time we really control immigration in the United States is 1924. And then the number of people that migrate to the United States from Europe begins to fall after World War II, but we still are getting refugees from the war. And the whole immigration system is overhauled in 1965 under the Johnson administration. Had tremendous impact on immigration in the United States. We'll talk about that. And a migration from Asia and the Americas greatly increases after that act. Ronald Reagan signs amnesty. Who's heard of the amnesty law in 1986? Almost 3 million undocumented immigrants were able to get legal status. And immigration continues to rise from across the world into the 21st century. And so here's the total number of, the numbers are a little confusing, migrants from across the world. 76,672,000 since 1790. Okay. So there's the crash course in immigration to the United States. And I just will go quickly through immigration to New Orleans, or rather New Orleans and Louisiana. Just be a couple of minutes. If we could go to the next slide.
Quick, Susan, while we wait for everything to upload, one thing you said over the phone is that there's a very popular myth that everyone's great-grandparents and grandparents came legally.
Yes, and the myth, and if we have time to go over immigration laws, there was basically no screening of anybody till like the late 1890s, and they'd reject you if you were a lunatic or what was it, a baker or something like that. So obviously a lot of people, my side of the family got in on that. We're overlooked in that regard. But
Nobody talks about at the St. Patrick's Parade that these are children of undocumented.
well, there just wasn't, it
migrants.
wasn't documented. You weren't documented.
Yeah, I mean,
It was,
but
until
still.
1924, there wasn't a visa system. But anyway, so immigration to New Orleans, we can just, next slide, that's the Statue of the Immigrant at the Mississippi River in the French Quarter. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so New Orleans was populated by the Chickasaw, Chitimaca, and the Choctaw people. We were a French colony for about 40 years, a Spanish colony for about 40 years, then a French colony again for about 2 years, and then we became American territory. So next slide. This will just, yeah, next slide. Yeah, and so during the Spanish, I thought I'd emphasize mainly Spanish migration because we are with Hispanic journalists, but there was very low migration that first 40 years of New Orleans. Very few people came from France. There was a little bit more migration during the Spanish colonial period. Spain at least encouraged people to come from the Canary Islands, other parts of the world. Next slide. But a big change in the population of New Orleans was, the population doubled from about 10,000 to 20,000, so still real small population. After the Haitian Revolution, that was the first successful revolt of enslaved people in the history of the world, and many people from Haiti in the escape that did not remain in Haiti went to Cuba, and from Cuba they came to New Orleans, and those are the numbers: 3,200 enslaved people, 3,100 free people of color, 2,700 white people. By the way, both the French colonists, French colony and the Spanish colony recognized free people of color and would allow people to enslaved people to gain their freedom. It became even more prevalent under the Spanish, and also enslaved people could own property. Let's go to the next slide. Big migration in 19th century United States, both in New Orleans and the rest of the country. And we're seeing very large numbers, particularly from Irish and German immigrants, the early part of the century. And Irish laborers built the New Basin Canal, which is no longer there, but it was basically a canal from the bus station to the lake, because a lot of commerce there was by boat, and this was in 1830, so all this is by hand, and enslaved people were considered too valuable to use for that kind of dangerous work, so they put to work the recent Irish immigrants that just got off the boat. New Orleans is a major port, and the estimates as anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000 Irish people died building the New Basin Canal, mainly from yellow fever. So what a fate. To be so poor, you leave your own country and then you die there. And many were just buried next to the canal. Let's go to the next slide. Italian and Sicilian immigration really picked up beginning in the late 1800s, and a new population to New Orleans and to the United States. Next slide. And like so many newcomers to this country, life was very difficult for them, and there's a lot of prejudice. And there was the famous incident of March 14th, 1891, the lynching of 11 Italian immigrants. Have people heard of that before? At the time, it was an international incident. It began, anyway, the police chief, he's an Irishman, Chief Hennessy, David Hennessy, there's a street named after him in Mid-City. He was shot, and people came to his side, and he said he used a slur for Italians. He said the Daigles did it. They took him to the hospital. They think he's going to get better. They never talk about who attacked him, and all of a sudden he dies. And there's just an outroar, and there was a massive sweep. The mayor called a massive sweep. Everyone that looked Italian was rounded up, 300 people. Eventually 11 went to trial. They were acquitted. They were all found either not guilty or acquitted or no evidence. And yet the public was outraged. So they actually put an ad in the newspaper, let's meet at Canal Street and St. Charles Avenue, and a mob of 3,000 to 4,000 people marched through the French Quarter to the back of the French Quarter where the parish prison was located at the time. yelling, "Kill the Dagos," and they stormed Orleans Parish Prison and killed 11 people, including a young boy. And it was just a massive, it was a disaster for relations, for those families and for international relations, and no one was ever punished for that. Next slide. And it's hard, you look at New Orleans now and how many leaders are Italian and what have you. Post-Civil War, Chinese laborers came, from California. They concentrated in the laundry business. Chief Harry Lee, famous parish sheriff. His daughter is now the president of Jefferson Parish. They were in the laundry business. Next slide. As we know, for many years, the largest population of Hondurans in the United States was New Orleans. It's now New York, but it started in the 1900s with the banana business, and it continued through the next slide, through the 20th century. And immigrants from Honduras increased in the 50s and 60s. It was still only about 10,000 people. Does this sound familiar? St. Teresa of Avila Church in the Lower Garden District? That was the center of Honduran and Cuban spiritual life. That church apparently just closed down, and that mass is now being offered at Our Lady of Assumption. Anyway, next slide. Cubans began to come after the fall of the Cuban Revolution and the rise of Fidel Castro. A great book by Sal Longoria, New Orleans grad, about his experience as a Cuban refugee. And next slide. This is one of the major changes in population in New Orleans, happened after the fall of Saigon, 1975. And the Archbishop of New Orleans welcomed immigrants to New Orleans. In the summer of 75, 1,500 refugees were resettled by Catholic Charities New Orleans. It was incredible. I later became director of that program. I heard the stories. It was legendary. No interpreters, no experience whatsoever with this, what have you. People just pitched in. Many people took immigrants into the refugees into their homes. The school teachers were the heroes. They made it happen. Next slide. And then the next major change in population in the New Orleans regarding immigration is, of course, Hurricane Katrina. We see a picture of the city. 80% of the city was flooded. 150,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. And we seem to forget the role the immigrants played in rebuilding our community, and many undocumented. Tulane Berkeley did a study at the height of the rebuilding in March 2006. Half of the laborers were Latino, half of those laborers were undocumented. And now we find ourselves 20 years later, and these people are now being, because of the change in policies, not laws, but policies, people are afraid to leave their homes. And it's just unbelievable.
Sue, that's a perfect segue to what Bobby Jean has been covering on the ground. Thank you for that perspective and that lesson. Absolutely fantastic. Bobby Jean, we want you to discuss the latest report that you did, and also Kat Bloomquist, your colleague. Where do we start with what you're seeing this wave of immigrant going through? Next slide, please. Bobby Jean.
So, first I wanted to touch a little bit on two things that Kathleen and Susan already said. One is, yes, that immigration is really long and expensive. I am an immigrant. I moved to the United States at age 9. I didn't get my green card until I had graduated from university. I was the only one of my siblings to be able to do so because I was the youngest child, and so I got to benefit from my mom's employment. People, I think, don't really always understand that it doesn't happen like that. And a lot of people are really afraid, not only because it's costly, but because of other reasons, connection to home, to naturalize. And that has also put a lot of people, especially after this 1996 law that they've already spoken about, has put a lot of people in jeopardy if they come into any interaction with the law. So one of the buzzwords, if you're a journalism student, that you can look into is called crimmigration. I just suggest you spend some time looking into that term because that's even expanded a lot now. So, there's tons of undocumented immigrants that get deported because of DUIs and things like that, that probably would not have happened 10 or 20 years ago. The other thing I wanted to touch on was those two laws that you mentioned, because I reported on them, so I can sort of give some insight. So the first one about cooperating with law enforcement, that was drafted in conjunction with the Attorney General of Louisiana, really to go after the New Orleans sheriff. And then there are other things in there that could get, regular folks in trouble. It's pretty vague language, but basically, even without 287G, and I can go into that, although Kathleen did a really good explanation of it. So even without 287G, when ICE interacts with a sheriff or any jailer, they can ask those jailers to hold somebody for 48 hours after they were supposed to be released on something called an immigration detainer, and those are voluntary. So I think people who are pro-immigration enforcement would like us to believe that they are not voluntary, but they are 100% voluntary. The sheriff's office is under a federal court order to not honor those detainers. Our current sheriff, I don't think, is in any hurry to get that lifted, because there probably lawsuits will ensue if sheriff's offices have to comply. But this is targeted towards them. The AG is trying to get this court order dropped. And so they are doing everything within their power to get the sheriff to comply with ICE's immigration detainers, so that someone who gets arrested never gets out of jail and gets transferred to ICE detention, even if their release from jail was because the charges got dropped or it wasn't, a viable case or something like that. So, so there's that. And then the other one has a lot to do with, there's states all over the country, including Louisiana, that now want to track immigrants who in any way benefit from state or federal benefits, right? And so you're right. You have to be a legal permanent resident to get things like Medicaid, SNAP, et cetera. The state wants, closer documentation of family members whose, let's say you're an undocumented mother, but your child is a U.S. citizen and you are applied for SNAP for your child. Now the state, actually the federal government wants to know more about you now. And so does the state, and that just, shoots fear into the hearts of people. And so there are people who are not applying for programs that their kids are entitled to. Same with Medicaid. But then there are programs that, undocumented students can go to university in Louisiana, but now if it's a public institution, they are required to report, how many students are undocumented and the cost of what that would, the cost that plays on the state. And that is a tactic that was created by, I can't remember the name, the Heritage Foundation, which is the same organization that drafted Project 2025. So I hope that's not, I thought I was going to do that really quickly, but I didn't. So I'm going to go over this story because if anyone in here wants to be an investigative journalist, this is a really, I think, good example of ways that you can do investigative journalism right here in Louisiana, in your own towns, et cetera. So you can go to that first slide.
You can open the presentation.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Or Bobby
first
Jean.
presentation.
It's coming.
Okay, so this is a story that I did with Kat Stromquist. She is a really awesome investigative reporter at the Gulf States Newsroom. That is a collaboration of NPR newsrooms across the Gulf South. And she covers criminal justice and immigration and other justice issues. and she and I had heard separately from a source. So if your journalism teachers are telling you to cultivate your sources, it's really important. Have those coffee dates, do all of that stuff. It's really important because that person came to both of us separately and had sort of continuously been harping on what she called traffic court with a death sentence, which was this longstanding policy in Kenner to arrest anyone that they found driving unlicensed, meaning in Louisiana, if you are not entitled to a you have to prove your legal status to get a driver's license in Louisiana. So if you're undocumented and this is the first place you've come, you don't have a driver's license, you're likely to get arrested in Kenner if you're found to not have a driver's license. And what the Kenner police chief will say is this is across the board. And when you look at the police records, you can see that there are people that you might assume are U.S. citizens, and I'll get into reason why I would assume that, or at least permanent residents that don't have driver's licenses, but those people are not being held on these detainers and then put into ICE custody, right? And some of those people have been here for years, and they get held on a detainer, they get placed in immigration detention, and they may still be in immigration detention right now for a detainer that was placed on them in February. So that is the gist of this story. The reason that the way that we came to this story was through 287G. So we kept hearing about this, and then I actually just had coffee with Kat, and we were talking about things that we were, learning about, and we saw that Kenner and Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office had both signed 287G agreements. They were the first two agencies in Louisiana to sign 287G agreements in 2025. And like Kathleen said, usually there is a big community revolt whenever these happen. So East Baton Rouge had one, and a local nonprofit immigrants' rights organization did a lot of community organizing and got that agreement taken down. So let's go into the next slide, please. And I won't stay there very long because we got a good glimpse of it already. So 287G is named after a section of immigration law from the 90s. We went over that. And it does deputize local law enforcement officers, certain people. They're trained and then deputized to do ICE's work. So that means if you are deputized under 287G, you can give somebody a notice to appear. What that is, it sets off their deportation proceedings. You're just a regular sheriff's deputy, and you have that power. You can issue a detainer for someone that's in your jail. So you are investigating their immigration. You can do all of this. I don't know. It just seems like that seems crazy to me that you would have the power to both arrest the person, book them into jail, issue their detainer, and start their immigration proceedings without having gone through years of training by ICE. So it wasn't widely used in the United States before the Obama administration. And then there's one particular model that we can talk about in the next slide that was really problematic and got, revoked under Obama. It's this slide. Okay, so this is, maybe you guys will get a link, but also it's really easy to find if you just Google ICE 287G. You can go on their site, and if you scroll down, there's a tab. You can get an Excel file, and it shows you all the participating agencies. And it's good to check every couple of weeks because Louisiana keeps adding agencies with 287G agreements. And you can see the agreements. And there's different kinds. Maybe it's the next slide, but that's okay. There's different kinds of agreements. So you'll see it says task force, which is the one that Kathleen was talking about. Basically, that really allows for racial profiling because it allows cops that are out in the community to see someone, investigate their immigration status before they're even booked into the jail, and then do all the other things we talked about. And jail enforcement is just doing that from the jail, from inside the jail. Warrant service officer is basically just someone, they're just ensuring this transfer, basically, from from local or jail or prison over to ICE custody. And so is everyone here based in Louisiana? Yeah? Okay. So maybe you can disregard this, but if you end up working in Florida, just know that as of maybe a couple years ago, I think, Florida requires all of their law enforcement agencies to have 287G agreements. So you can pull those documents, and you can also pull other documents to see what is happening under 287G. I grew up in South Florida. I know that Broward County's sheriff's office and police office, I think, has been in the news a lot for how much they like to cooperate with ICE. Some of those agencies don't because they're just required to, so they do what they got to do. You can go to the next slide, and y'all can also tell me if I'm talking too long. Okay, so we already went over all of these. Yeah, we already went all over all this, so we can move over to the next one too. Thanks. Okay, so it's okay if your hypothesis is wrong. Like I said, Kat and I thought that 287G was driving up the number of immigration detainers at Kenner. When we filed for documents within the Kenner Police Department, we found that it really wasn't the 287G agreement that had been signed in March. It was just that we have a governor and a president now that is pushing immigration enforcement, and the Kenner police chief is also on Governor Landry's Operation Go task force, which Andres reported. And so all the mechanisms were in place for them to be honoring these detainers. And so what we found was from the beginning of the year until May, which were the months that we asked for the information, the number of immigration detainers had gone way up. And so you can go to the next slide. I can start talking. So the next slide is just, it should be a picture of, okay, oops. Yeah, okay, so this is, yeah, you can go to the next one, please. I don't want to leave that up there for too long. Oh, okay. I think that, it's okay, it doesn't matter. I had blacked out the name of this person because I wanted to protect their privacy, but it must not have come up on the thing, so please forgive me. So the first slide was the actual booking, and then the second slide is a booking on an immigration detainer. So what we found when we asked for booking information from Kenner was that the way that they document their immigration detainers was by putting in a separate booking, like the person was being booked back into jail. And so we were able to create a spreadsheet. You can go to the next slide. And it showed, it had everybody who was booked on a detainer, their charges, et cetera, and narrative notes for writing. And then we were able to see that most of the people booked on detainers were booked for driving without a license, and the vast majority of them were Hispanic. And all of this we were able to do without filing a FOIA. Have you guys heard of FOIA yet? So Freedom of Information Act request, I think it's really good to practice filing them. I think that you should not ever expect to get anything back from ICE.
But then you can sue them.
You can sue them. And if you are a freelancer, you can use Muckrock. Also, I think if you're a student, it's harder if you work for an organization because you have to use their lawyers, and it can take forever. But yes, you can sue ICE, and you can get the ACLU involved if you can, and you can get your documents. But in the meantime, sometimes years go by. If you want stuff right away that shows, cooperation between local law enforcement and ICE, look to that local law enforcement agency for the information and get creative about it and then be willing to build your own spreadsheets. And then you can go to the next slide. So this is just saying there are other things that you can vet it against. So this is data from deportationdata.org, which is a nonprofit organization that just FOIAs ICE all the time and puts the data up there. They don't analyze it. There are other people who analyze the data, like TRAC, which is the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse at Syracuse University. I'm happy to give all that information to Lucy and Andres. That's been a really amazing resource for immigration judges, immigration detention statistics, and all of that. So if you want to cover that stuff, that's a really great place to first go and look to see who's in detention, what states are they in, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so there are just other immigration topics that are not 287G, are things like this that's been happening a lot. People have been reporting it a lot, of ICE arresting folks at their check-ins. That's been happening a whole lot. So this is a story that I worked on at the beginning of the year about a family from Honduras, one of whom is a young adult with heart problems. They moved to the US. They had been here for more than 10 years, and they were deported after being held at an ICE check-in and taken to a hotel. And so they were never allowed to contact their family members, contact their attorneys, until they had already ended up back in Honduras. And you can go to the final slide. These are just other stories that I wanted to highlight. None of these are mine, but basically they just show that, you know, we get to report a lot on what's happening with ICE out in the community, and that's kind of new for me. Before this year, I was reporting a lot on stuff happening inside the detention facilities, again, because I relied really heavily on my sources. But whatever you think is the most egregious thing that's happening out here, there's, you know, definitely more egregious things happening inside the detention facilities. And Louisiana has 9 immigration detention facilities. Almost all are privately operated. Yeah, and so these are just some stories that you should definitely check out to kind of see what's happening in all these places. So I'm gonna yeah.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, buddy. And I think, you know, just seeing it in the headlines, you know, reporting on this as well, every time a story drops and the comments and the DMs are just like, is this real? Is this going to happen to me and my family? You know, and I want to pivot over to Angela Ramirez with Puentes. I guess first, let's break down exactly what Puentes is in case people aren't familiar. And then how are your clients, your families, and your students that you help with that organization? How are they kind of feeling in the current climate? I know a lot of those are high schoolers, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I couldn't be happier to be here. I taught at Loyola for about 4 years until they told me to go and work for Puentes, which was an amazing transition, and I'm so proud of the work that we have done. I do want to mention that I taught a class here called Becoming Latino, Becoming American. And it was an amazing class. We just celebrated the contributions and the history of Latinos in the U.S. And so I gotta say, how happy are we that Bud Bunny is gonna be the halftime at the Super Bowl? That is, you have to have some good news every once in a while. So I'm just absolutely proud of that. And as Mabel said, where's Mabel? Like, we need to celebrate our heritage every opportunity we have. And that's what we do at Puentes. Puentes was created in 2007 by 3 amazing community leaders because there was the need to serve the Latino community that had made New Orleans their home after having, you know, migrated from Mexico, Central America, to rebuild the city. So we have changed our programs throughout our existence. We recently, and by recently I mean 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we decided that we were going to focus on Latino youth. And so our programs are education programs that serve kids that go to high schools in Orleans and Jefferson Parish. And we also work with the parents to be engaged in their kids' graduation plan and understand their rights and understand their options when their kids go to high school and want to continue their education. We have a very popular leadership program that now more than ever is a safe space for our kids to come together, to simply share their fears and their stories and their parents' stories. And I think at the beginning of the year, we were so excited, to start our programming. We were excited about our weekly meetings with the kids. And we very, very quickly realized, or just evidence, that the kids were not showing up because they were scared. And they were not only not showing up at our programs, at our office or community center, but they were not going to school as well because they were afraid of being detained.
Jefferson Parish and New Orleans.
Yes, exactly. We work with 4 different schools in both parishes. And let me remind you, we have a slide here. So our Hispanic population has almost tripled since the 2000s. So in Jefferson Parish, you see that there was a 144% increase. And we, right now, given the last report from the Board of Education in Louisiana, actually, 39% of kids from K to 12th grade in Jefferson Parish are Latinos. 39%. But we still have a 32% rate of graduation rate for EL students. So not all EL students are Latino, but many of them are Latino. So we have a massive amount of Latino students that are not being served the way they should be served, and they're not given the opportunities their peers are given, right? So that's why we come to the schools and we basically strengthen their EL programs. We make sure the kids have access to all the information they need to succeed in high school. They graduate high school, and our ultimate goal, is not only college, it's community college, trade school. We want them to continue their education. And they were doing phenomenally. But now you can see how their minds are somewhere else. Their minds just went to survival mode. And now it's not as relevant or is not as urgent. Where are they going to go to school in the next year? Where are these seniors are going to register or apply to school next year? That's no longer a priority. And we see kids that are really afraid of going back home and not finding their parents. And we also have to, and it's been, if we can go to the next slide. It's been proof that not only attendance, and we don't have specific data about it, but we have seen it. We have talked to our peers in the schools, EL teachers, EL coordinators, and they see it specifically in the Latino community. And we serve schools like Bonneville High School, where they have 2,500 students, and 70% of those students are Latino. So we see drop in attendance, we see disengagement. Parents also. We create so many opportunities. We have a program specifically and exclusively for parents. And parents do not want to engage. Parents do not want to leave their houses. Parents, if they do it online, but it is so crucial that we create community right now. It is so crucial that we remind each other that immigrants belong in this country. It would not be what it is if it weren't for us, these kids have enormous intellectual capital. They have the resilience of no worker you'll ever have. And still, they are being denied the opportunity, well, by these acts, for 19, I think is the latest one that decided or that mandates that any organization like education, health providers, children and family services, if they receive state money, they need to declare the status of their clients, and they need to report how much money they're spending. So we worked so hard with so many students to get into Delgado, for example, UNO, and now these kids are receiving messages saying that they cannot enroll for the next semester until they prove their immigration status. So I think we forget sometimes that immigration is a moral thing. It's a humanitarian thing. This is the lives of kids and whole families that came here for better opportunities. We all know that the American dream is work hard and you'll have a dignifying life, but this is not dignifying. This is the complete opposite. And for those programs, those organizations, and we have many organizations, and we could go to the next slide. We have all these organizations that work with youth and work with the Latino community. And many of us had to switch. At the beginning of the year, we were like, okay, regardless of what we offer to our clients, to our constituents, we now have to educate the community. Know your rights. So instead of, working on our essays for applying to a college or working on our SAT, or we were just informing people, empowering people, letting them know what they needed to do or what they need to do in case of being detained or in case of being pulled over by the police, which also I'm so glad to have local officials and have elected officials that still care about the community, and to have a municipal ID right now that gives you the opportunity to identify yourself. I know it won't serve as a driver's license, but it does give you the opportunity to identify yourself without having to show your passport or your country of origin, which right now is auto-incriminating. I don't know if that's a word. It is a word in Spanish. Auto-incriminatorio.
You can make whatever you want.
Yeah, Spanglish is my favorite language. Isn't it? It's amazing. So yeah, right now we are dealing with a very, very low morale. We're dealing with kids that are at this crucial age, 16 to 24, where their identities and their self-esteem is being formed, and their brains are still developing, and we need to change the narrative because these are not pobrecitos, these are not kids that are here for the Medicaid or to get free anything. No, these are brilliant chingones and chingonas that are willing to give it all, and all they need is an opportunity. And many of our kids don't have status, and that every day that's harder and harder, to pursue or to get. So yeah, that's what we do.
Angela, before we move to questions from the audience, because we've got some really strong ones here, you just said change the narrative. Is Puentes allowing media in right now? And if so, what are the stories that you would help tell with families that are scared, but you say need to get the message out in order to change the narrative?
Yeah, so now with social media, it is so easy to be absolutely frightened and in panic mode. We try to tell people not to not to freak out, like not to, this is exactly what the government wants us to do, and it's just to drop everything and leave. And no, this is a time where we get together and we fight together, we inform ourselves, and we fight for our rights. And the narrative about like, you need to do it the right way, or you need to go through the process. Well, many of the immigrants that come through the border and show themselves or present before an immigration agent at a port of entry, they are starting the process the way they should be starting the process if they are seeking asylum. So for many radicals that just love saying that 10 million illegal aliens entered the country during the Biden administration, that is absolutely untrue, and that is absolutely irresponsible to say. So I think if we could get the facts right, like people would have a very, very different opinion and a very, very different approach to what it means to have immigrants from Latin America and from all over the country, coming to this country where, from all over the world, coming to this country, which, and I can't remember, there was a priest, I think it was at Notre Dame, that once said, the US has a huge sign saying, help wanted, and then a huge sign right next to it saying, no trespassing. So they need our labor, they need our intellectual capital, our businesses, our entrepreneurship. They need what we bring to the table. And the narrative needs to change in that sense. We're not pobrecitos. We're doing what we are supposed to do. We are contributing in massive amounts. And if we could go to the last slide. That's what we do. Next. This is some of the news that we follow. We had, and it has to do with, the difficulty for kids focusing in class with everything that's happening, the impacted attendance, the reluctance among families to engage, and the increased bullying also towards EL students. So there was a case in February about a little girl in Texas, Jocelyn, and she was 11 years old, and she committed suicide because she couldn't take the bullying that she was being exposed to at school because her parents were undocumented. So this narrative, we need to focus, and the media needs to show all the things that we bring to the table and all those success stories and the facts. The facts. What is it like in terms of money, in terms of how many international students, how many international faculty, changing all these policies because it's not the law, but changing all these policies. All of a sudden, it's just harming what has made this country an amazing and diverse and absolutely unbeatable, incubator of talent, incubator of research, incubator of technology, and we are part of that equation, and people need to know that.
Angela, thank you. I'm going to ask Sue the first question from the audience because it goes in line with the statement that you made about the numbers that came in through the Biden administration or during the Biden administration. Then we'll go to Kathleen next. Thoughts on the Biden admin for immigration? This person believes that it's the most illegal immigrants this country has ever received in a 4-year period. Sue, you have the numbers on this. Tell us more, please.
Yeah, I think, I think we really have to look at how we got here, and I think the Biden administration really messed up, and more Latinos voted for Trump than any other Republican in the history of presidential elections. So, and a lot of what you said, the response would be, well, you have to come legally. Okay. So, anyway, I believe, I believe in Catholic social teaching, which is based on the fundamental principle that every human being is a child of God and deserving of dignity and respect. And from that, everything flows. And from that principle, people have a right to migrate if they can't find a decent life in their own country. The church says that. But then the church also says, well, countries have a right to control their borders to maintain the common good. And the common good is about maintaining the dignity of every human life within that country. So it's a balancing act, but I think Biden blew it, okay? Because first of all, if you recall, we had Trump was very upset about immigration. The numbers were peaking during his term. That's when he started to separate children from their parents at the border. Okay, he thought that would stop that. There was a tremendous outcry. Thank God that stopped. I'm not sure why we don't have that outcry now, because parents are being separated from their children in our own backyards. But whatever. Then COVID came and the numbers plummeted, okay? So then all this gets built up. People want to come to the United States, and they want to come to the U.S., and smugglers are very smart, and they make a lot of money because they know how to manipulate the system, and people start coming in record numbers. There's no doubt about it. And so Biden tried to, they kept saying there's no crisis at the border, and everybody could say there was a crisis at the border. But it really didn't get attention until Abbott, the governor in Texas, starts sending people around. But the numbers, it's really hard to find numbers on immigration. And you talk about border encounters, but no one's really clear what that means, because sometimes you cross the border, you can cross 3 times. But the Migration Policy Institute in December 2024 said 5.8 million migrants and asylum seekers were allowed, cross the border during the Biden administration, but under different programs. So let's, back in 20, 30 years ago, it was very rare for families to come to the border, right? It was almost always single men looking for work. And then smugglers started to notice, if you come with a child, they don't want to they can't detain the child, and they don't want to separate the parent from the child, so bring a child. And so people started bringing a child. And I would do the same thing if I was living in poverty in a country where you can't get ahead. But that's what started happening. So more and more people are coming to the border, and it used to be you would evade Border Patrol. You wanted to get past Border Patrol. But then it became, no, I want to find Border Patrol and tell them I want to apply for asylum. And so that's what started happening, and the numbers go up and up and up, because that's what our policies were and our laws were, and they were very well-meaning, and they were good. That was a good idea. But the numbers just kept growing and growing and growing. And then Biden said, okay, because a lot of the people that are coming to the border that are almost always going to be eligible are going to be people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. So let's not make them come to the border. Let's not make them go through the hell that is northern Mexico now for anybody that's trying to migrate to the United States and doesn't have money, because the number of assaults and rapes and kidnapping, it staggers the mind. It staggers the mind. So anyway, so he made this program, a parole program, where people could come from their home countries. Do you remember hearing about that? The Cuban, Haitian, Venezuelan, and Nicaraguans. They had a sponsor in the United States that was here with legal status, and if that person could pass a background check, then and they paid for their own plane ticket, or the relative paid, then they came here. Yeah. So about about 500,000 people came that way. that was a great idea, but the numbers at the border didn't stop. There was no response to that. Then he did respond with the CBPP, Customs and Border Patrol One app. So finally, the idea was before you would cross any place on the border, you find a Border Patrol agent, you turn yourself in, you get in line for asylum, and everybody knows that's years down the way. I would do that. I would totally do that if I was in those shoes. But that's what the numbers start going up. So they say no more crossing the border except at a port of entry. There's about 17 along the border, 14, 17. And you must have an appointment on your phone. It's called the Customs and Border Patrol One app. So people said, okay, I'm going to do it the right way. And they're applying for asylum, which we have in our immigration laws. You have a right to do at the border. That's a law. That's a United States law. You can come to the border and apply for asylum. Okay. But so anyway, now he says port of entry, you must have it. And people start doing that. And about 1 million people came in that way. And they got work authorization. And so both the people that are coming through the Cuban, Haitian, Venezuelan program and the app, CBP1, they get work authorization, and that's wonderful. But you should have heard the folks that have been here 20 years and don't have work authorization. And all of a sudden, people are coming in with work authorization and getting good jobs, and you've done everything right for 20 years, and you can't get work authorization. There was a lot of bitterness about that. And of course, who's going to be more vulnerable now if they're looking for people? The ones that don't have work authorization. So it had a way of pitting the community against each other. And when Abbott starts sending people to New York and Chicago, these are folks that cross the border with nothing. They were, if you had, you know, they are already impoverished. They have no support system, especially if you're from Venezuela. If you're from Cuba, you're probably going to have family here, right? Haiti has a lot of family members here. Nicaragua, but very few Venezuelans were here to welcome people, and there were a lot of Venezuelans coming to the border. And so they're under the United States, and they have no support system. I was a refugee resettlement director at Catholic Charities for 14 years. We met people at the airport. It's the same type of people, traumatized, no money, nowhere to go, they need help, but you come across the border with the CPB1 or whatever, or you come to apply, you get no support. We would meet them at the airport, bring them to an apartment that we had helped furnished, help them get a job, get ESL classes, get them on their feet. It would only last 9 months of help, but it would help. These folks had no help. So they're sleeping on the floors in Chicago police stations. And everyone's mad. And I know that many Latino that had legal status in these cities were furious at what they're seeing happening. So anyway, so Biden blew it. The administration blew it. It's like they had no policy. So when you have 5.6 million, 8 million migrants crossing the border in a 4-year period, and you don't have a program in place to help get them on their feet and on their way, there's going to be problems. And so, and then there was, you know, so that's the best numbers that cross the border. And then another probably 1.5 million getaways. So anyway, we're talking maybe about 8 million people that crossed during the border during the Biden administration. And of course, we had about 1 million green card holders a year. So it was a huge increase in a short amount of time, and again, without the programs in place. And I'm just thinking now that Trump has stopped, now that the border's essentially closed, which is very tragic. Oh, one more story. I just heard a Jesuit priest that works on the border, and he goes to help people in the shelters in Mexico. He said that half the people that got their appointment were kidnapped on their way to the appointment. And when you're kidnapped, it's not funny, right? It's a gun to your head. We're going to kill your kids in front of you unless you get the money. So now that we have now that there is nothing happening, or the border is a lot quieter, maybe now it's time to rethink. Maybe we have to think of a better way for people to be able to apply for asylum. Do they have to come through more than Mexico? Basically, we've just allowed the cartels to run our immigration system. You don't get to the border unless the cartels say you can go to the border. So why don't we rethink this whole thing? Why does it have to be at the border? Why can't we have asylum stations all over Central America and South America, but anywhere where it can't be corrupted. It's so corrupted now. It's so evil what happens to people. I have a friend whose husband it took him 4 times to get across. He is so traumatized now. He's just clinically depressed. He saw humanity at its worst. You know, he finally made it across, and they paid, and it was $20,000 they owed people, and I gladly helped pay $300 of that. And they paid back their relatives in 1 year.
Dude, thank you so much. we got a question for Kathleen.
We have to know, how do we get to the place we are now?
For sure.
So, Andres, just to let everybody know, we have microphones. So if you guys want to chime into the conversation, let us know, interject, say anything, make a comment. Let's just have a conversation about everything that's going on. So this is open for you guys, okay?
Thank you. And we're going to go, we did have some questions submitted beforehand by the audience, so we'll go run through that first, and then we could offer the mic. But for Kathleen, this question from the audience: how do you respond to families who've lost loved ones to crimes committed by illegal immigrants? You know, when I think of this question, Camp 57, Louisiana lockup, just opened this month, and Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary. We know of the 51 people that are in that facility. A lot of them committed rape or convicted rapists, murderers, and other violent crimes on their record. You know, again, how do you respond to families who've lost loved ones from those crimes?
So the first is, I'm very sorry for your loss. I don't think we stop being a community just because maybe we don't agree with each other, right? So the first thing is, I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm very sorry this terrible thing happened to you. And when we look at the role of foreign nationals in the United States, and we look at, again, trying to control the narrative, how much of the mythology that immigrants are committing crimes, they're full of disease, they're this and that. It is the same narrative since 1890, people. And we have laws, right? There is a set of, I want to say something first. So I used to work for this great judge, Judge Charlie Wiegand, who had been, basically, he was older than dirt, and he had a beard, and he would comb his beard on the bench, and he would say, "Hey, partner." And his philosophy was always, he was an immigration judge, when somebody came in front of him, the first thing he would think is, who raised this person in front of me, right? Not, like, basically saying, it's not so much about where your passport is, but, like, are you a product of your society, the country where you were born, or are you a product of our society? Because a lot of times, I have to tell you, the people committing the crimes are products of our society. I think this idea that immigrants are foreign nationals, undocumented, are committing all of the crime is clearly a myth. When you do the statistics, the crime rates are not, that's not what it is, right? And yes, do bad things to other human beings. And I will tell you, as an immigration lawyer, if you think you know that what bad things people are capable of, you are not. You don't know until you've listened to torture stories and trauma stories and trafficking stories. And so, I do think bad people do bad things, but they're not bad people because they're foreign nationals. And I think that's part of the narrative we have to change. Immigration law has things that keep you from getting into the US. We call those grounds of inadmissibility. And then once you're here and you commit crimes, things that get you deported. And our immigration law also has really strict rules about, in certain situations with convictions of X, Y, and Z, ICE has to hold you. They cannot release you on bond. A judge does not get to review your bond. It's called mandatory detention. And it's very, very broad. We have passed, our Senate, not an immigration law, a criminal law, passed the Lake and Riley Act, which says if you are arrested for a crime, and you happen to also be undocumented, you can be held in custody with no relief for bond, not convicted. And so I was writing at one point, I made this little sign, like, should you care about some of these things we're talking about, is due process. Due process is fundamental to our life and as a democracy, to your freedom, to, right, this idea you're going to get a fair trial, 12 angry men, all that good stuff. When we have laws like Lake and Riley that say you can get arrested and we will detain you indefinitely, even though there's not a conviction, on something very minor like shoplifting, that should cause you pause, because I guarantee, well, there's probably someone in here walking around with their passport, because there always is whenever I try this trick. But I seriously doubt any of you, except for that one person, have proof that you are a U.S. citizen on you. It is not your driver's license. It is not your social security card. It's not even your birth certificate, right? It is going to be your passport. And so when we have enforcement, when we have law enforcement that is not tied to due process, when we have arrests that are not based on probable cause, when we have the ability to racial profile, the next steps are really bad, okay? And so we have, immigration is complicated. Our community is complicated. It is not as simple as everything is black and white. We as a society have to say, you know what, yeah, bad people do bad things, but our fabric of a community to have due process, to not have our neighbors in fear, to not be personally afraid to walk out of the house or be driving a car, means that we say due process, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, do you have a warrant, am I free to go, is more important or as important as safety, and is actually going to build community safety. I rest, Your Honor.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Next question.
but we have someone right here to speak on actually what you just said.
Hi. So based on what you said, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
So you were saying how like a person's actions are defined by how they were raised, and yeah.
Oh, I don't believe that genetics have anything to do with your choices to be a good or bad person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and you were saying how like immigrants aren't like aren't inclined to do like bad things, like based on like I'm like trying to connect it to what you said.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm from El Salvador,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have MS-13 over there, and I actually lived during like one of the worst years that criminal rates were like at an all-time high. So when you have those gang members immigrate to the U.S. and they repopulate and they have those like make those crimes here in the U.S., like what would you say is like the course of action?
So I think, going back to Judge Wiegand, right? You know, it's like, this is my house, right? When you come into my house, I expect you to not put your feet on the coffee table, right? And I do believe in the enforcement of law. I am not an open doors person. I don't believe everybody should be here. I believe if you come in and you do something bad, well, you know, maybe you should be deported. I think our law has lots of flaws in it. What I'm saying is I think this idea that we should sacrifice community because some people may not have a piece of paper, and that I don't think we should be equating a lack of a piece of paper with being a bad person, right? And I think things like MS-13 and gangs, and man, that's so complex, especially when we look at the role of the US government. But what is also important is people who are here in the US, whether they have a piece of paper or not, shouldn't be afraid to go to the police. And when we as a community have people afraid to go to the police, or afraid to go to school, or afraid to go to a hospital, or afraid to go to a lawyer, what we do is we give power to the bad people, right? Because now they can extort, now they can abuse, now they know that they can get away with things. I think we're in a really fascinating time as a country. And I don't mean fascinating like, wow, that's really good. I just mean like, it's also really interesting because I'm a legal nerd. But it's, we're at this time where I think we have to take some long, hard looks at ourselves. We talk about, there's this myth that there's a right way to come to the US, okay? It is lawful to show up at the border and claim asylum. It is lawful to come as a student and go through the embassy and everything else. But the fact is, our law is incredibly narrow, and it is incredibly unresponsive to the needs of our community, right? We have no vehicles for businesses to timely and effectively get labor, right? So we have an H-2B program, which is a whopping 65,000 visas a year for people to work at ski resorts and landscaping. We have the H-1B program, which is a whopping 85,000 visas a year, right? We are talking about, the statistics show that 100 million people, foreign nationals, enter the US every year lawfully with a visa. 100 million people, and we've got 200,000 work visas. We've got a permanent residency process that takes 20 years. We have no mechanism, right? So asylum is only something you can apply for inside the US. My wait time for my family to come after I've done everything exactly right, 20 years, 25 years, like these are, and yet we have employers who are happy to not do it the right way. For example, Signal Industries here in the Great Deep South, right, engaged in horrific human trafficking, lawsuits, Loyola, of course, was involved, right? Great lawsuits, fought tooth and nail on all sides, huge settlement, and the economists say that Signal, who was doing everything the right way, which was basically human trafficking, still saved over $20 million in labor costs. Why? Because we have no mechanism that's protecting these workers. I am so sorry, Lucy. I am just going to keep ranting if you don't back me up. But I think I don't think any of this is simple. And when we are talking about journalism, how do you take all of that and make it into clickbait? I don't know. Like, there's no room for the nuanced conversation, okay?
That's our goal here. It's to inform at the deepest level possible so we know how to create those things and grab people, but with the correct, accurate narratives. That's the point. Another question from the audience here. How successful would you consider Trump's current administration regarding immigration? Successful obviously can have a lot of meanings here. Who would like to take that question?
I can.
Yeah, you go.
Okay, so
successful according to whom?
Yeah, and it has to do with your comment also. Every community has bad apples, right? Every community has a percentage of people that commit crimes. They're horrible people that should be prosecuted, should be in jail, should be, where they can be rehabilitated, right? The problem is when you assume that everyone in that community, or you send the message that everyone in that community, or that those reflect what others in that community are. And the worst of it would be when you don't even give due process to the people that you say are criminals, right? Because that's just the floor of everything. If you don't have your constitutional rights, you don't have anything. That's the floor. That's the minimum. And I am an attorney also, but I do not practice anymore. I don't miss it at all. My bank account does, though. But so I think it is successful according to whom, right? Successful in terms of are you dissuading people to come to the U.S.? Are you persuading people to just leave the country? Are you keeping talent, international talent, from coming? And is that your purpose? Are you impeding international students, international faculty, researchers to come to this country and continue doing what this country knows what to do? Then that's successful. But I think this is, even though the laws haven't changed, the policies have, and they have created a colossal mess.
So the Department of Labor has reported that the filing of what's called labor certifications, which is the first step in an employer sponsoring somebody for a permanent residence, are down over 30% in the last, compared to this time last year. So I mean, it's successful. If the goal is to stop migration, it's working. Mm-hmm. It's also the goal to make you afraid, right? And these things of data collection, right? So part of the reason why Landry and the state want to collect this data is there was a lot of lawsuits by states against the Biden administration on immigration policies that the court said you don't have standing because you can't prove harm. You can't prove that there was a financial issue at stake. Well, so by collecting this data, now we're going to get the data to be able to sue in the future. It has a chilling effect. I mean, for a lawyer, we're really afraid of, is this going to be a fundamental attack on a case called Plyler versus Doe, which says that elementary schools cannot ask about immigration status, right? This should make you afraid. Why? Because what comes after immigration status, right? It's not where it ends.
Thank you.
Which I just want to say, if you want to investigate some things, students, that maybe you want to call some elementary schools and find out what they're going to be doing about that, because definitely the community colleges, like you said, are now collecting data and doing scary stuff. So I think that's an option for you.
And my law partner is actually working on trying to put together some litigation on this issue. So I'm just saying, we're in.
Yes.
If you have a good story and you bring it to Veritek, we'll publish it.
All right, so our last question from the audience. What do you think is something Hispanic/Latino students can do to celebrate and recognize Hispanic immigrants? Thinking of this question, Viva Nola did a 6-part series on the rebuilding of Hurricane Katrina, focused on the Latino aspect, from workers to, the immediate aftermath. I know, Juan Francisco over here at Telemundo 42 also did a few stories as well, and always does. Brenda Murphy with Jambalaya News always does those highlighting stories, her and her team. The only reporter here on the panel, Bobby, I know you do a lot of investigative stuff, and we saw a lot of your work today, but, what is that like? And then we can open up to the rest of the panel, but as a fellow reporter, how do you kind of celebrate just people in general and keep that focus on Hispanic, Latino, and really highlight, I know we've all kind of said it, but really focus on the good as well as the bad,
Sure. I think that it's, I can I guess talk about it from a reporting standpoint. I recently interviewed someone who is I don't want to call her a food historian, maybe more like a food anthropologist, and she wrote a book about rebuilding New Orleans, Sarah Fouts. Basically from the perspective of laborers, but also laborers who ended up creating food systems in New Orleans that didn't exist before to feed people who were rebuilding the city. And I think that food and music is just one of the most, like two of the most amazing ways to celebrate, where we're from. I'm from the Caribbean. I am from a British colony. So I don't want to tell, Latinas and Latinos how to celebrate their own culture. But I guess, when I have the opportunity, try to find ways to highlight those things. Also, when we talk about entrepreneurship, Hispanic women in our community, right? They're leading in entrepreneurship. So maybe lifting up those people. I think that you mentioned something about sort of interviewing more people who are like success stories, and I have to say that I think that I suck at that a little bit, and it made me think that that's something that I really want to do, because all we are really doing is showing the oftentimes as journalists we're showing sort of the darker sides of things, and which is why that series from Viva Nola was so great, and they were able to highlight lots of different people. So I don't know if I made any sense.
No, I just think, Angelica, with and thank you, Bobby, for that. But Angelica, you have a cohort of potential journalists under your wing. Tell us what that goes, because it's a podcast, right? But is there a video aspect? How do you go about getting interviews and stuff like that?
Thank you. Yes. So our kids came up with a video podcast called Latidos, and it's available on Spotify and YouTube. And they interview each other, but they also interview Latino leaders, and they do exactly that. They talk about their experiences, their successes, also the bumps they found on the road. And we were actually highlighted by John Leguizamo, in his show Leguizamo Does America. And this is a phenomenal show if you haven't watched it, because this is a narrative that we're talking about. He goes to different cities with high population of Latinos, and he highlights the small businesses, the elected officials, the artists, the nonprofits, that work for the community, and their contributions, the amazing work they are doing, and that's what we need to focus in. And so Latidos and Leguizamo Does America, watch those when you get home.
Any more questions for the audience before we give it to Ramon, who has some Guardian reporting that he also wanted to mention as well?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I have a question. There is a lot of talk about the illegal immigrants, but what about the illegality of employers, businesses that are taking advantage of those flaws of the system, even government agencies, that sometimes it's basically human trafficking, because human trafficking is not only sex, about labor trafficking. I haven't heard any story or any legal consequence that happens to them, because it's not only the immigrants that are breaking the laws, but those laws are being broken because there is actually opportunity for them, for people that are taking advantage of those flaws.
I'd like to subscribe to your newsletter.
We got everybody jumped on that one. All right, I guess we go left from right.
Did you cover the ICE raids in central Mississippi?
I did cover the ICE raids in central Mississippi under the first Trump administration. It was the largest at the time. It was a series of different chicken factories there in central Mississippi, Hattiesburg area. And it's incredible, the impact from that, because it was over, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sue.
Almost 700.
Almost 700 helicopters in the air, first day of school for a lot of the children.
700 people arrested, but.
And so a lot of them had to, their children were there on the bus stops, and no parent to pick them up after school or anything like that. But as far as I know, no one from the chicken factory aspect charged in that. And to piggyback off of that, I know we already mentioned the Lake Charles racetrack raid, another massive one, I think the biggest thus far in Louisiana, the Mirabeau Water Project, where at least 7 people were detained there trying to build infrastructure for the city of New Orleans for flood mitigation. the Bollinger Shipyard raids as well. I believe it was 10 or so. The city of Kenner had their new fire department building being put up, 7 people arrested there. We could go on and on. Because as we said, social media has just...
They're not raiding, they're not going after the employers. You're absolutely right. They're going after the weak people, the other, and the one they can scapegoat. So that's an excellent point that y'all need to raise as much as possible. But by the way, when there was immigration reform in 1986 with Ronald Reagan, they created the I-9, and that's the form you fill out when you get a job. You have to show either your passport, which shows ID and eligibility to work, and or your driver's license or Social Security card. Remember, do you ever fill that out when you get a job? It's completely unenforceable. The employer just writes it, okay, I saw it, put it in the file. They don't even do anything because Republicans insisted at the time, we don't want to make it hard for people to hire undocumented immigrants. That was basically the point. So all along, it's been happening that way. But I just want to say that you all can really change the stories, but you have to tell the stories that people, that will resonate with people's hearts across the political spectrum, you know, and I think those stories particularly are the stories of families being destroyed. I mean, that is, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you don't want to see little kids, beautiful little children, torn from their loving parents. And so the more you can do that, and you can do that because you have the language access and the cultural access. And when I was growing up, the Vietnam War, we saw every night on the news, oh my God, everyone got so sick of that war because we saw all these people suffering. We've got to see more of the suffering of the families. I don't think we're seeing enough of that.
Kathleen, if you want to chime in, you know, again.
So this is literally something I say on the regular, which is, man, you know how quickly we would get reform is if they would actually enforce the laws about I-9s. Like if they would actually go after employers, we'd have immigration reform in a heartbeat. So here's an interesting fact, right? It is unlawful for an employer to hire without somebody having shown their documents, but it's not unlawful for you to work. I mean, it's a violation of status and all that other stuff, but like the I-9 issue is on the employer. None of the, like Signal, right, they were committing this human trafficking like all over the place, but a lot of jurisdictions wouldn't go after them, right? And so we have issues of big companies within southern Louisiana, like also committing these atrocities, you know, doing issues, and there's no enforcement because it's the politic of it, right? And yeah, no, I'm all for employer enforcement across the board. And the labor trafficking is an issue, right? Like we are getting into these kids who are coming who are now at 14 working in factories. And so what do states do? They lower the working age, right? Like there's a disconnect.
And Bobby, you wanted to chime in as well?
Sure. One of the things I want to point to is that ProPublica, I think maybe last year, did a really great series of harm done to employers on dairy farms in Wisconsin, I believe. And I think that the employers were somehow held accountable in that case. And so I think that sometimes when there's physical harm done, something, I mean, not always, but something can be done. But ICE will say in its official like newsletters whenever they do a raid that these are to not only, you know, get all these, you know, illegals out of this whatever facility they raid, but also to punish the employers. But you're right, we don't see any enforcement beyond that. And that's basically, you know, rhetoric. I think it would be really great if journalists and even student journalists were able to show that this isn't happening. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Andres, is when you were reporting on Mississippi, this is something that I'd heard, and I don't know, I know this is maybe being broadcast still or streamed still. So,
Your sources will be
hearsay, but I think that what people don't talk about is that the close relationships that business owners have with local law enforcement, that also has close relationships with their ICE, with people that are in the ICE community that are part of that community. And so what I heard, and it's not substantiated, was that, you know, like in many poultry processing plants, the conditions were really bad. People were losing fingers, things like that. They were so bad that undocumented workers wanted to organize for better conditions. And that is when the raids started coming. So who in that company is communicating with whom to get, you know, and then those poultry processing plants, you know, they're still there. So they got their employees back.
And that begs to differ as well. You know, when the Bollinger Shipyard also got violations, it was just a fine. Anybody here eat Felipe's? Anybody? They also got raided when I was in college. Shout out Lisa Collins, you know. But they were found to have hired, at, I believe, around 4 at their uptown location right by Tulane. All they got was a meager fine for that. So it varies, and especially it does help when you know a few people in the process as well when it comes to fines. But now we're going to bring in our Ramon Vargas, our treasurer, to talk further. All right.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, Bobby ended up covering the stories, but I did have a question that I thought could contribute to the journalism discussion. I'm just interested in all y'all's thoughts, or whoever wants to speak up. The morality, one of the stories that does really well, and I've commissioned some of these or even written some of them myself because it's a vehicle to, you know, that the headline is going to bring a lot of people in. And so, you know, you've got like 600 words where you can kind of pack in like the current immigration stuff. But there's like this like schadenfreude that I think people feel when it's like a mixed status family that supported Trump. And I think you know, the one that kind of comes to mind is the lady that did that salsa, like, I'll vote for Donald Trump, and I think her husband is in immigration detention. And then I wrote a story, I know one time, it took me about 15 minutes to write, and it got like 5 million page views, which is good for The Guardian. And it was the guy, it was a undocumented immigrant who had started Trump Burger, right? And all these like menu items that like were, you know, slamming Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden leftist figures. But also, like, I think that sometimes, like, you're kind of like, these are the people that are like at the bottom of the paradigm, right? Who are kind of feeling like the brunt on it, and it's like, yeah, like they vote for Trump, and then, you know, their loved ones get deported, and then they're still like, well, like, I want my vote back, or even in some cases they're like, I'd do it again, you know. And so I guess the morality of that is also something that like I've kind of like thought about. I've kind of taken my foot off the gas pedal because it's like, all right, I got a couple of those out there, but I'm just curious about, like, you know, we were talking about getting people to read it, and I justify it as like, okay, well, I know that people are just going to clink, like, they're going to love to see, like, you know, Trump Burger founder facing, you know, deportation proceedings, but then it's also like, I don't get the sense that they're very powerful, you know, and then on one hand, it's like that's 5 million people that are reading about immigration, which is good, but then I think also it's not a very, you know, it's difficult to not feel like you're just kind of making fun of someone who is, you know, obviously facing something very serious. So just curious, and various specialties, your thought on the morality of that.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. I mean, so I guess I have 2 feelings about this. Like, the people who I think need the most highlighting in terms of telling immigration stories that will maybe turn the tide on people are people that are always the hardest to reach, and those are people who are, for better or for worse, incarcerated, because the immigration detention system is all former prisons that now house civil detainees, right? And so that just makes it, you know, harder to tell those stories. And so then you find people who are in mixed status families who have more complicated stories to tell. So I guess I don't really know the answer to that, because I don't think that people, having reported on people in detention for 5 years, I feel like it's a lot harder to care about something that you cannot see. And so, to your point, you know, if there's a mother who has had a U.S. citizen child and does, you know, whatever she's doing to put food on the table every day, she gets stopped in Kenner, arrested, and is now detained in Basile, Louisiana, and can't get out. Like, if someone can catch that moment, you know, on camera or something like that, that goes a lot longer than talking about the absolute horrible conditions inside that facility in Basile, which, like, they had a tuberculosis outbreak last year. Like, it's not.
Well, I guess I agree, but to your question, I think there's such a divide in this country that we can't understand why in the world. I just talked to my sister this morning. Why in the world do you support this person? And she can't understand why in the world I support this other person. And so, I think, that's pathetic. That's sad. When somebody supports somebody and then they're betrayed like that. But I think if in your reporting, you can get at why did they support him in the first place? Why did he? I mean, people will say, oh, his policies. You know, but then they don't know what policies, right?
I just think that sometimes that answer can be very, like, uncomfortable to give, and then also just, like, if the answer is also very just ugly, right? Which is, I mean, I think that, like, I think that sometimes it's like, well, you know, like, I know I've certainly seen, and it's tricky to say, but, you know, where it's like, well, like they weren't supposed to do it to me.
Right.
I think that is like an element of that sometimes is explicit and sometimes it's implicit, right? It's like I wanted them to get them out, but not like us, you know, even though like we're not. Like,
well, if you even got that out of the story, then that's something. I mean, if that person was able to get that right. Anyway, but that's a good question.
So in our office, we call it everybody loves their immigrant. Like this is a very regular situation we have where an employer will come in and go, how do I get my guy legal? My guy's not like those other guys. And to which we just have to, I mean, we have this, no, all of the guys are like your guy, right? And how do we, I think this is a very much a moral question for all of us, not just journalists and lawyers too, and is in a time when there is so much trying to fracture us as a community, how do we build community? And we're all wordsmiths. I mean, a lawyer is nothing but a wordsmith, right? We refer to people as community members, not illegals, not undocumented, not even foreign national, just a member of our community. I think about ICE sitting in the back of courtrooms waiting for the person they know is an immigrant. Well, how do you know they're an immigrant? Because their last name is what? I mean, like, I guess if it's Abear, that means you're not an immigrant, but if it's, Gasparian's definitely an immigrant name, right? In South Louisiana, not so much in Glendale, California. So I was an Armenian joke for all of you out there, by the way. These questions of what kind of society we want to be, they're complicated. And I think, but that's the thing is when people come in my office and they say, I like my immigrant, and I go, well, you voted for him, right? Like you brought this on yourself. But then it's like, that all that does is shut down being able to find commonality. And that's the guy that you want reading the article, right? And so I don't know how we do it because, I took myself off of a lot of social media since January. So I don't know. I don't know how people get news anymore.
Thank you so much. We're just going to squeeze in one more question from one of our communication professors.
Hi. It's so insightful. I have like a million story ideas from all these conversations. Thank you. Joe Duke and I teach student journalists, but this is probably a question, we try. But we, many of you talked tonight about the fear in the community And Bobby Jean talked about sourcing. How can our students or journalists in general find sources who are willing to talk, who are able to bridge that divide so we can tell these stories and change hearts and minds?
I'm having that same question too, and I'm thinking, and by the way, Professor Hiroko Kasuto is here in the audience, and I want to acknowledge her and her decades of work on the immigration issue, but I'm wondering when the worst has happened and the dad is picked up and is in detention, and you have U.S. citizen children, I think that's when the family's willing to speak out, because they know the kids are protected, and I think that you have to find stories like that. And those are the most compelling stories, too, because nobody wants to see these children, especially if they're U.S. citizen children, being the worst thing in the world that can happen to them, to lose a loving parent. So you have to develop the sources. And I was thinking that maybe the lawyers need to get together, and when they find a case where they have U.S. citizen children and the mother is willing to have them speak out, even if she's undocumented. That's what we did at my church. We had a man that's in detention. The mother wanted to do whatever she could, and we had a front page story in the Times-Picayune about these 3 beautiful children that are being torn away from their parents, and we got incredible, powerful responses. But maybe you lawyers that are in the field and you're seeing these cases, and Puentes as well, when you see a case that you're safe in the sense your kids are going to be safe, they're U.S. citizens, maybe even the mom's documented. People have got to speak out, and it worked very well to stay under the radar for decades, but it's not working now.
So you make up a great point, and Bobby Jean has an entire sheet that Andres turned into a barcode that explains sourcing through fear. And you may be able to support this. I know Ramon as well. I'll never forget covering Katrina. My current COO, who was my news director at the time, who I will forever love and respect, maybe for this huge moment during Katrina, she said, Lucy, Tan, go on set, say everything that we just said in English in Spanish. We got to get these people out of here. Tan, say it in Vietnamese. And, we got emails, and she didn't care. And I certainly appreciated that she didn't care. But when I was on the ground, I remember el hondureño, el mexicano, not wanting to necessarily talk to me because I spoke Cuban Spanish. And my family roots were legal, and theirs may or may not be. And that was the pinning against that you were talking about, that the systems do. So what do you think is the value in finding the right sources to create the most authentic connections so that the most truthful stories can get out?
I think it's the most valuable thing. And I think that it's really, really difficult. Don't beat yourselves up if it doesn't happen right away. I guess the hope or the hopefulness I want you to have is that if somebody else gets the story because they're better sourced than you now, you'll get the next one. And there's so many immigration stories out there right now that I'm so for a long time I felt like I was screaming into the void, and now there's lots of people focused on immigration in the region, and I'm so happy because I can't do it all. So there's that. But get to know your advocates, get to know the lawyers that are doing this work, get to know other reporters that are doing this work that want to let you in, and they will help you with your sourcing. And I don't know how many advocates there are here, but I think that one of the things that you need to, once it comes to the journalist, we're limited in how we can ask someone questions, and people are really afraid for really good reason. I never want to know that someone I interviewed that told me that they were happy to go on the record did not understand the risk in doing so and is now in detention or is now deported to Honduras or whatever. I can't force feed their request for anonymity, but I can offer it if it's asked for. So people who are connecting sources to us, those are conversations that you should be having with the vulnerable people that you know, whose stories you think can be shared, I guess. They need to know their rights and what they can ask for as subjects of the news, because I feel like we have, so much power as newsmakers. Yeah, and so that's what I would say. And I think more stories would be out there if people knew that there's creative ways for us to tell these stories that are still rooted very much in the truth and don't, reveal where somebody lives or works or, their last name or something like that. But it has to be sort of this, there's this really delicate dance, basically. I don't know if that answers your question well, but you can get those sources, but they have to know that they're going to be protected. And unfortunately, as journalists, we can't just come out and be like, we want to protect you, That's it.
I guess to kind of piggyback off that, I've had those conversations with lawyers just about how to keep clients safe, always trying to make sure, I know that you are putting your life on the line, essentially. And I know Juan, when we go out and we do stuff, and Brenda, I know when we go out and we do stuff, and it's always, how do we kind of put this story out there? How do we tell Paola Kluat's story about how she was going to get her green card and she was arrested there at her ICE appointment and shipped off and now has to breastfeed in the ICE detention center 4 hours away? How do we tell the story of Miss Kashanian, who was doing her gardening outside in her Lakeview home when ICE agents rounded her up? And it's about working with lawyers and working with advocates and kind of seeing how much they want to release and how sensitive they want to release. And I know that it's not necessarily the thing you want to hear in a news business when you're tight on deadline and you need something like that, right? So, but just having those conversations with management, news directors, colleagues, and it's like, look, this is where I'm at on this is what I can report, and then kind of piggybacking with lawyers, and not necessarily collaborating, because it is free press, but kind of breaking it down for them, like, this is how I'm going to do it. Is there anything more it can offer? Can you show me the documents? You could redact it or I could redact it, and having that back and forth. Any photos you could share, I could blur, you could blur it, So I found it that a lot of the immigration advocates and lawyers in this area are very, while they do have that fear as well, but they're willing to work with you on big stories and what they can help you with, they will help you with. But anybody in need of those sources, initial sources, what helped me was what Professor Duke told me. If you want to know how to do the news, you got to watch the news, you got to read the news. And so starting to watch and read a lot about how national covers immigration, how regional covers immigration, and how local covers immigration really helped me out when I got back to New Orleans, where I'm born and raised. And I already kind of knew people who to talk to, but that opened up, okay, here's the lawyers I could talk to, the groups I need to talk to, what's available freely online, because DHS, ICE, and a lot of them, like we've discussed and shown today, a lot of that is available free online for anybody to access at any time. So that's what helped me.
Yeah. I would say, once you start looking at the news stories, like Andres said, Louisiana has a really small group of advocates and attorneys that are working super duper hard. So you'll see the same person quoted in multiple people's stories. Find that person, and what I hear from attorneys, they would much rather you build a relationship with them than just hit them up on deadline and be like, I need you to find me this person now, So your news director will know that maybe it's not coming, the story's not coming now, but it'll come in a month when you've cultivated that relationship.
Guys, we are past time. We want to thank you to these incredible panelists for your expertise, and we really hope that you've gotten perspective and depth of knowledge, and just know that everyone that's on this stage, we're an email away, and continue the conversations with these resources, whether by phone, social, or email. We have the barcodes on your way out. Thank you, Loyola. Thank you, dear professors here that have taught so many generations. And thank you, Diane and Mabel.